Use the room. Already muted. Okay. Yep. Okay, so we will run now the presentation and demos of the three main features that we had in version 10. So we start with the evolution of UI. So we continue to evolve the DWC in both to be more a more modern UI, more also to address customer needs, requirements that we get. And so the last part, the main change that we made in version 10 has been a redesign of the definition part of the Workload Designer. Main requirements that we was looking to address with that was to reduce the number of UIs, of the panels, experiences that you had in the UI. So in until 9.5, you had workstation defined on some panels, all the other objects in the Workload Designer. So there was split. Also, the event rules was a different interface. Also, to import work application templates, you have to go in different interfaces. So they are now all in the same places. So if you're working with definitions, you just open the Workload Designer. Now we have folders, so the look and feel is more about folders and navigating to folders. Of course, it works also if you're not using folders, and that's also the example on the case for AWS. And we basically have two views. So if you see on the top, we have the Explorer area and the Workspace area. So the new Workload Design is based on these two concepts. In the Explorer is where you navigate through folders, you look with quick filters, more advanced filters. You can specify the type of objects, and you see a table with all the objects that you're finding. So it's how you find the object that you want to work with. Or if you want to create new objects, you have the create new, and you can create anything from there. You can customize the order of the columns and so on, and you have advanced filters as well. The other tab is the workspace area, so it's similar when you had the open items in the old Workload Designer. So all the objects that you're working on the left, you have the list of objects and the structure, and you can navigate on what you're editing. And on the right, you have the properties and the version for versioning and auditing. You also have the actions for import and so on the top. And in the old Workload Designer, the layout was made for each object, each job stream. You had multiple tabs. One of the main complaints with the tabs for the properties was that to see all the properties, you had to click on a tab, scroll down and see, scrolling and see all the options in that tab. Then switch to the next tab and scroll, and so on. And so the only way to see all the properties defined for that object was that one. Now they are all in vertical layout, so all the sections are collapsible but are on the same in the same screen, and so it's very easy to just open all of them and scroll to see all the options of that definition. So that simplifies a lot on this aspect. So basically, there is a one-to-one relationship with all the Workload Design. So the old tabs are now sections in the properties table panel on the right. Yeah, do you want to switch to the demo?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I hope you can see everything. I'm sure that even from home you can see and hear us correctly. So here is the new dynamic workload console for the version 10. As you can see, is something really different with respect to the 9.5 and even to the 9.4 console. We have a bunch of new things that I want to show you. This is the new welcome page, in which you can see there are something different. Now the layout of this video is a little bit cut it up. This is a problem that will be fixed. But if I refresh, it will be correctly
Your section is 5, yes, sure.
Okay, highlight. So this is a video in which you can see basically a walkthrough of the new Workload Automation version 10 dynamic workload console. There are a bunch of important things like the welcome kit, in which you can find basically information, basic information on workload automation. So what is workload automation, basic useful links that we can even find here, even the famous automation app. So everything is here, and you can just click here and jump on the automation hub, in which you can download and see all the catalog with all the plugins that we have. Here we have based on which kind of user you are. So I am an administrator, as you can see, so I can see all the tabs of the Workload Designer, of the Workload console. And here we can have a list of the most important features that we usually use with our console, with some tips. In any case, we have also a few videos, and few of them have been edited by me, so please be kind and give me one like on YouTube if you want. And here we have the self-service catalog and self-service dashboard. Another thing that we have changed, as you can see, is the sidebar that now has this fancy dark mode. But another important thing that regards the sidebar is that now you can collapse it into different ways. So maybe this is not useful for the welcome page, but imagine that you are maybe modifying a really huge job stream. You are in a graphical view mode, so you have a lot of dependencies and something like that you need to see as much as possible. Then you can just collapse it and have a large view of all your job stream structure. So let's move to the Workload Designer. So the new Workload Designer, as we like to call it. As you can see, I don't have any annoying new pages that pop up from my browser. Everything is here. I can select the engine that I want to use and apply, and it will load me all the content, so all the objects that I have on my database. This is the explore area. So
yeah, it's actually just a count, so it's not loading all the database.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, yes. And as you can see here, we have all the kind of objects that we can create with the Workload console, including the event rules, the workstation, the folder, so everything that can be saved on our database. We can customize the views, so we can move all those objects here. So I don't know if you prefer to see folders before workstation, you can do that. You can move the event rules on top. You say, I don't mind about variable tables. You can do whatever you want. And all those changes will be saved for the user that is actually connected to the web UI. So in this case, WA user will now have this view. Okay. From the left, we have this tree view of all the folders. So to know if you are currently using them, we can see all the structure of our folders. So actually, I don't have subfolders, but if you imagine that under that baseline, I had a bunch of other subfolders, I will see a tree of all the folders that I have. Another thing that we can see here is this toggle button that basically enable the view of all the objects that are included in all the subfolders. So in this example, I am under the root folder. If I toggle off this, I will only see the objects under the root folder. And if I toggle on, I will basically see all the objects that I have.
So from the selected node downstream to all the subfolders.
I have this that is really annoying me. Okay. Let's see how can create something. Let's
And
start from
the same include subfolders option applies when you are searching. So
Exactly.
if you remember part of the name, but you know also that it's on a specific line of business, you can select just the line of business and search for that. But you don't know, for example, the actual specific folder where it is.
what the heck?
Okay.
Let's see what actually happens if you want to create a job. You have this view that lets you see divided by categories all the kind of jobs that you can create. Of course, if you have much more plugins, you will see much more kind of job definition that you can create. I think that this here, in this environment, there are only the plugins that was mentioned by Marco, so the one that are installed by default on your workload automation server. So we have database, Java, MSQL, RESTful, compression and encryption. There are something even new, I guess, that we introduced on 9.5 more or less, and with 10 we have
Splunk 5 probably, yes.
Yes, and we have added it directly with installation of the server. Then we have the file transfer that we will see later, and all the jobs that I'm sure that you already know. I will try to create an executable job just to let you see how it feels to move to the workspace area. So in the area in which you have to modify and create your job definition. I only wanted to say something. Of course, my view is much more better than the one that you are seeing here. Can you confirm? Yeah, the color are
The contrast is better.
Yeah, the contrast is better. You can see and distinguish correctly all the fields. Here we have this part that contains all the tabs that are needed for customize my job definition, and by clicking on those balls you will actually open all the related tabs. So if you know, for example, that you need to modify the task, you can click on the third ball and it will open environment because it is the fourth. So
that's probably an answer.
So, well, here I'm sure that you know much better than me how to create a job definition. You can just give here a name, search for your workstation that you can pick up from this pick list. And as you can see here, my balls are now colored in red. That means that here there are some information that I need to fill up in order to let this job definition to be saved. So we have mandatory fields to fill up. And if we don't mind to have all those views, but we just want to create the lightest possible version of a job definition, we can hide all the optional information and just have what we have to do here. So just add a task here, host name. It is a task that can just retrieve me just name of my machine. Yeah. No, I don't want.
Okay.
Okay. So these are all things that can help you to navigate on the creation of any kind of object.
Is that sorry, that screen is expandable, so people who like me can't see diddly's got anymore. Can we make that editing size wider and reduce the index elements?
Yeah, you can actually move all the elements like this one that I cannot. Okay, so if you want to much more focus on the job definition, yeah, with mouse it's much more. And as I said before, if you want everything larger, then you can collapse, totally collapse the sidebar and have this view that it's really huge.
I guess you can zoom in as well.
Yeah, sure. That's the browser zoom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom in or out.
See if I can show you something. For example,
what does the event rules grade look like? Because you did quite a radical change to that from previous versions into 9.5. Has that format changed? It's not particularly popular among my engineers, the 9.5 setup for creating event rules. Has that changed at all with 10.1?
The new event rule was already introduced in 5 FISPAC 5, I think. So
Yes.
I don't know if you're referring to that or the oldest one.
We're in the process of. But
Okay, the old one. No, so yeah, the new event rule is exactly the same. Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's exactly the same, and it can be created directly from here. So as Franco said before, you don't have to move outside from the workload designer.
So while you're
Everything
editing the
is
job
here.
stream, you can edit also the event rules and work with them together and save them together.
And I don't know if you are familiar with the new layout, but it's exactly the same of 9.5. So we have the events, the actions, you can select what you want. So, and it's basically maybe the one that expired also the construction of all the object on the new workload designer. So I mean for jobs, job stream, and even workstation, that because even for that, with previous questions, you had to move to design, clicking something that was create workstation or something like that. And instead from here, everything can be created from the new workload designer. So pool, dynamic agents, everything. So it's just like a Swiss knife. You have everything here. If you need something, you just can pop up the tool that you need. I just forgot to say that here from the explore area, you have the list of all the objects that you have divided by object type. So workstation, event rules, job stream, and every time you click the object, you have the list below all the objects that you have on your database. Let's see, for example, if I pick up something. I will just bring up a couple of job streams. I want to edit them just to see how it feels to have more objects open inside the workspace area. Okay. Here we go. So okay.
So you also have the actions directly on the job stream. So you can launch the graphical view or download as a work application template the job stream or submit the job stream directly with those buttons.
Let me close this because I don't want it. So
Yeah, that took me a bit of time to figure out the buttons. Because before it would be on the pull down menus and
Yes.
things like that, so I was looking there. But
And
Yeah.
only if you selected the right node in the structure. Yes.
yeah, it's important to know that that little arrow thing
Mhm.
is submit job stream or submit job into the current plan.
So for testing, for schedulers, for testing what they're doing is
we have
easiest
also
way.
this.
That's what Nige
they
does.
download this work application
Creates a
template.
job and then submits it straight into the plan, don't you, Nige?
Two questions. Does this work with early versions of IWS?
Not yet.
So you have to be what version? To use be on 10.1 to use DWC 10.1.
You have also the engine to
Yeah.
be at 10.
So you can't use this with a 9.4.6 or a 9.5.5 or engine. You've got to go.
Not the new workload designer.
And is DWC 9.5.04 directly compatible as in direct? Is it direct
So-
to 10.1 or is it you have to
No,
get it out as
let's say the DWC version 10 is compatible with 9.5, but you cannot use the new workload designer. You have to use the old workload designer that is still there for the older versions.
It has been hidden here under manage workload definition. So
Yeah, you still have the old managed workload definition to work with 9.5.
And is this a direct upgrade from 9 so I can go from DWC 9.5 to version 10, or do I have to remove version 9.5 and put 10 in?
It's not mandatory, so it's just about the workload designer that you have to use. So
Yeah, I mean to upgrade. I mean, I've got currently DWC 9.5. Yeah, so I want to. So if I want to use, do I need to? Can I upgrade it from 9.5 to 10.1?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, from installation perspective, so we made a huge change on the installation process, architecture, and so on to 9.5 in 9.5J, but version 10 is basically the same of version 9.5. So installing version 10 is like installing a 9.5 FISPAC 5 on top of 9.5
Yeah.
FISPAC 4.
I did just say, yeah, upgrade. Yeah.
Okay, and just to clarify, that version 10.1 will work with 9.5 engines for both D and Z, will it? You just would have a different designer.
Yes.
Okay.
So the only thing that you have to mind that if you are planning to do something on your 9.5 engines, you just need to use the old workload design. For the other things, you can basically use that for doing what you want.
I take it you'd get an error. It wouldn't let you open a 9.5 using a new workload designer.
I think the new workload design, won't work at all. You get an error.
We get a warning maybe. Warning
With the new workload design, because there is no UDJR, so there is no API. UDJR. The opposite, on the other side, the old workload designer just provides a warning if you try to open that with version 10. So if you find an issue, because there's still a new object, the new workload design. So if you see something that is not working on the new workload design, you can still go back to the old workload design, even if the engine is version 10.
Because the reason I ask is we have an issue on Z where if you are a bit foolish, shall we say, you can have a user on a different LPAR updating the database from a different version and it will let it happen and you get a database corruption. So it's protecting against that, is it?
No, yes, that's that part is covered by the APIs. So it's not a problem about that. It's more that on the engine we have put some logic. So usually we always said all the description, all the fields, all the objects was coded inside the DWC. Now with the new workload designer, the description of all the fields, all the content of how the objects are made is moved to the engine. So that's easier for us to make backward compatibilities, but that's not available on older versions. So in the roadmap, we have the idea of implementing a layer in the middle of DWC to make that compatible with older version, but it's not available yet. But from a corruption perspective, it's not a problem because that's only works through APIs, so that's fine. Specifically for Z, that actually requires a Z connector that is version 10, but that's embedded in DWC. So the new workload designer works also with previous version of AWS.
And there's a question in the chat, are we going to have DWC long-term plan view for Z in 10.1?
Not yet. I mean, it's not in GA version. We are planning, I mean, it's in our roadmap, but I don't have a date yet for that.
We talking of that, will there be other enhancements? So I don't know, well, you know Z, but when you add things to the current plan through option 5.1, there's a mass of modifications you can do before you add it, which isn't available. Is that going to be modeled in DWC or is it still going to?
That's another important announcement, yes, that will be roadmap. But,
there are basically 3-4 points that are missing for Z. One is LTP, another one is modifying, adding a job stream dynamically to the plan with more options than what it is now. Then we have the submission probably of application groups also missing. If you have any more, let me know.
Like I say, I think one of the things that certainly my colleagues in operations always nagging me about on the distributed side compared to Z is things such as all dependency options. So being able to actually have the whole landscape. So in Z, they just go click all, right, they know they've got 900 successors that are impacted by X, Y impact, and they can communicate that to their support application team very easily, or the MI manager, whoever it is. Whereas with distributed, they find it a lot harder to demonstrate that landscape quickly.
Is that the old apps thing you're talking about?
Right?
That old apps you're talking about?
Yeah, it's all depth, yeah.
okay, just the first layer. Because we have that on the graph view and what if, so that's possible there. But yeah, you are looking more at the list.
Layer information, because you just go bang, you get a lovely big idea.
Maybe they just need a list.
That's it, isn't it?
Yeah, just a list view for that to easily communicate now.
Can we go on? So just a bunch of things that we missed. So you can collapse the objects. You can see the list of jobs of all other dependencies, collapsing them. decide to add them. And then we have the three buttons here that actually let you to submit your definition, to download it as a workload application template, or even to see the graphical view.
Open that again.
Mm-hmm.
Expand that again. Okay. The button near the job is to open the job definition. So in that way, you can directly navigate and see the job definition for that job. And open that in the editor, so you can edit that one very easily.
Well, I think we covered almost all
Yes.
the things. So
Let's switch to the next one.
let's switch to the next topic.
Manage file transfer. So, yeah. So as said before during the macro presentation, our strategy is dual. On one side, more integrations with MFT tools, and the other one is improving the built-in capabilities for managed file transfer in the products. We started in 8.9 version, adding basic file transfer operations via FTP, SCP, so the first file transfer plugin that we introduced years ago. A big chunk enhancement has been added with 9.5 Fixpack 5. There we added, we were still basing the file transfer on a remote server, standard server like an SCP, so an SSH server, an FTP, or a SFTP server, or a Windows server. But we added the support for transferring with a single job multiple files, using also wildcards, pre and post actions, like renaming a file on the source machine or on the target machine after the file has been transmitted. As Pasquale was showing, the two additional job types for handling file compression, decompression, and the file encryption and decryption. And also dedicated dashboard to monitor the file transfer operations. With version 10, we add into the same file transfer job, we have also added now the agent-to-agent file transfer. So before that, you was having to select FTP or SSH, for example, SCP, and now you can just say transfer to that agent. One of the main benefits of that is that you don't need any more credentials of the target machines, because when you was logging into an FTP server, you had to provide credentials that can expire. Now, you just need to have access. So all the security is based on our security file. If you want to transfer files from one machine, from one agent to an agent, you need to have access to both agents from our security file perspective, but you don't need specific credential that could expire. So from an operational perspective, it's much easier. And also you don't need any server to be installed on that machine that sometimes requires to make two jobs, one to transfer to the file server and one to download. But here you can just transfer them. Yeah, and as said before, we are still missing, compared to MFT products, we are missing still missing the inbound files scenario. And in roadmap also here we have the idea to make better integration with the MFT tools or make our own capabilities in the future to cover also this scenario. So if you are using specific products right now for inbound files from partners, let me know which one, and so that will help us to prioritize which plugin which integration to build first. And down you can see all the job plugin types in the managed file transfer that we're also adding. So we had for a long time the integration with Sterling Connect. We recently added the Google Cloud Storage, Azure Data Lake Storage, the plugin for Axway Secure Transport, and we are now working to be released in June the AWS S3 plugins, and other ones are still in roadmap. So. For implementing the agent-to-agent file transfer, it's from a user perspective, you are just transferring files from one agent to another in a DWS environment. The point is, we handle environments that are very complex, geographically distributed, multi-cloud, and so the two agents may not be able to communicate with each other. So instead of creating a direct connection, we implemented an internal component that is the file proxy that acts as a bridge between the two agents. And this can is automatically installed on the master, but you can also install it outside as a standalone component so to have that in different data centers, or depending on your network, load scalability, and so on. It's an active components, so it's automatically distributing the workload if you have multiple instances of that. It's automatically installed with the master, and implements that agent-to-agent protocol. It's installed only with the distributed master. So in case of AWS Z, you have to install it manually as a separate component. It's secure, so all the communications between the agents and the file proxy are in HTTPS. All authenticated with ad hoc JWT tokens that expires are valid only for that specific file transfer. So it's very secure, and it does not store any file locally. So it's just works in streaming. So no information about the file is stored locally on the file proxy. So there is no exposure from that point of view. And it's very easy to configure in availability because it's active. So you just configure multiple instances of that, and that was both for availability and scalability perspective. So for Z, as we were saying, it need to be installed as standalone. The rest is the same. That's more in details, more from more technical point of view, how these agent-to-agent jobs works. So basically, we start submitting the job to the job workstation as usual. So you have basically two workstations. One that is the usual workstation where you're running the jobs, and another workstation that is the target. It starts submitting just the job normally on the target agent. It starts the file transfer plugin here, and here we have the logic. So it starts initiating the file transfer to the file proxy that connects back to the broker to send the request to the broker or the controller, depending on the configuration, and that sends a new request to the target workstation. Here you have a new file transfer, so you are the target of the file transfer. Connect back to the file proxy to complete the link. So the target workstation connects to the file proxy. At that point, we have both agents connected to the same proxy, and we can, in streaming, transfer the file down to the target or receive the file from the target workstation. So it works in both directions. Very similar if you're using the agent gateway. In that case, the broker does not connect to the target agent. To the agents, is the agent that is connecting the gateway that is connecting to the broker, and so we have all connections in the other side. So it's the step one. We have the job agent that is pulling the request to run a job because we have a long polling there to get all the requests, and the same for the target workstation is pulling the request to transfer the file. But it's basically the same flow, just the direction of the connection that is different. All connections here are all HTTPS connections, so very friendly with the proxies and so on. Proxies and firewalls. And let's see them about that.
Okay, so let's move again on our workload designer. Let's clean up all the situation. So we will focus only on file transfer.
Close.
Oh, sorry.
Don't mess your environment.
So, as you know, I don't know where is my file transfer, but since everything is divided by category, I'm sure that it will be here.
Without?
Never happened. Let's refresh. Oh, okay.
Oh, browser complaining with the
Mhm.
certificate.
Okay. So again, let's see if this time we can do. Okay, that is fine. It was really fast. So let's see what we can do here. So we are just trying to create a brand new job definition of file transfer just to see how the new protocol will work. So I will choose a workstation, this one. So this will be the workstation that will run the jobs and the workstation in which our transfer will start. So what we can see, what we can do here is that starting from this workstation, we can browse through its file system. So select a bunch of files and send them to another workstation. So this will be my source workstation. As you can see here in the connection panel, we have maintained both the new protocol. So we have the external, which is basically the managed file transfer that you know with version 9.5.
Show the protocols. Yeah.
In which you can use a bunch of protocols like FTP, FTPS, FTPS, SSH, Windows. So you can do whatever you want with this protocol. Just needed the server name, the port, the user. So a lot of information that with workstation to workstation protocol you may not, you don't need to have. You just can select here the workstation, the destination workstation in which you want to send your files, search from this pick list and pick one. So I want to send my files in this pool that is in Europe. So as you can see here, I don't have to specify anything, the IP, the server, the port. So in a world where we can barely remember what we have eaten for breakfast, imagine to remember all the IPs, the ports, where are all my servers located. I don't even care. I just want to send a file to a workstation to another. So that means that to enable my environment, to extend my environment, to have the transferring to be enabled, I just need to install a dynamic agent on my VM that is in Europe in this case. So that means that I will be able now to send files from this workstation to that one, or even the vice versa, because it's even possible to receive files from this one to the workstation that I have chosen here. Let's start with the case in which we want to send files. Here we have the test connection, so just to see if our workstation, destination workstation is up and running.
We still have a field with the username, and the reason is that by default it's running with the agent user ID, but in order to access a specific file, you may want the job to run with a different local user ID, so it can access files that are accessible only to that user. So we impersonate that user locally on the machine's target or source machine to access those files.
You know that that is like a single instance that gets used with different automations. So if there is a password change or a user change, you can change it in one place rather than have to change it in every.
Oh yeah, you can use variables as usual. Yes.
For the authentication.
For the user, yes.
Yes.
You can use the variables.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, so here are all the action that we can perform. So we can send or receive files. So the send is I'm sending files from the workstation that I have used for defining my job definition to the one that I have selected here in the connection tab. Okay, receive will be the vice versa. We can just start to browsing.
About the password, so also you see the password. I said before you don't need passwords, but you see password here. The reason is that, as usual, for any job that we run, if you need impersonation, so you need to run with a specific local user ID, or Unix, we can do that without requiring a password. On Windows, you need a password. So as usual for any kind of impersonation that we perform on to run jobs.
Yeah, in fact, as you will see, I will not use any kind of user here. So another thing that we can do is to browsing on the file system of the workstation that we are currently selected. So as you can see, I have all the files that I have under that folder that I have used to start my search. I will select a bunch of files that I have in this folder. So those one. And here we have the list of all the files that we have selected. We can delete a file from this list if we do not want to send it anymore. And
you can also use wildcards there. So in this case, we selected the files, so we have the full path, but you can also use wildcards if you need.
Can we configure the actual location where the agent is going to deposit that file? So one of the concerns might
on the target
have
machine
around the security of that file when it's being transferred from one to other. So can we define an out point and the directory we want it to be dropped into?
Yeah, on the target machine, you also have the destination path where you are uploading the files. Yeah. The target machine.
Yeah, the destination path. So where the files will be moved, you can even add any files permission if needed. I will send file here, and you have other options that you can actually do on your source and your destination file. So, for example, imagine that I have picked up those files that are really huge files. I'm sending them, and I do not want to have them anymore on my source VM. I can delete them.
So but only when the transfer is successful, they will be deleted.
Of course, once the transfer.
And then that helps a lot with wildcards. So if you have a directory where you want to periodically move files to other machines, you just specify that directory star. It selects all the files there, and it will delete the files after the transfer. So. And you can rerun the same job every 5 minutes to continuously move those files.
You can even, if you do not want to delete them, you can just simply move in another folder. So even that can be useful.
Or rename them.
Or you can even rename them. So again, with wildcard, all the files that you have selected, you can rename them and saying, okay, now those files should be named .transferred, for example.
You can use simple wildcards, regular expression for the naming patterns.
What if you've got a certain type of file, but on multiple devices? How would you configure this? So could you parameterize the host name in that job? So then it will go and it will transfer from multiple devices the same files.
From the source is a multiple one. Okay, so you have the
targets. So you've got multiple targets, and you wanna basically pull files, the same type of files
from multiple.
Yeah, from multiple targets.
I will use workstation classes in this case. So in order to duplicate the job, one for each workstation, and in that case I will run the job on the target workstations, pushing the file on your target.
All right. So you do a push.
So in that case, you have a job for each device, push it to the same server.
You can say we can do the same thing here. Maybe selecting receive as option in which you want to receive from.
No, but in this case, if the files are on different sources, you just run the jobs there, and you are sending the file to.
So if I'm backing up,
maybe the only thing is that your files should be at the same target on all the workstation. So you have one single job definition that can pull the object with all that characteristics.
Yeah,
but in the plan would be a job for each workstation.
Different jobs
that you are cloning with workstation classes.
Oh, you answered the question.
Yeah, so there is always a balance on how much you want to put in a single job or not, because having, of course, too much jobs that will become the environment, it will become too much complex, and you will have too many jobs to manage. But on the other side, having a job that makes too much things means that it can fail more often, and that it's harder to recover. So
it's just that's the kind of environment we work in. So it's the same kind of file,
No, sure,
But
that's class.
on multiple, say on 100 targets.
Mhm.
So, okay, so that would mean 100 jobs.
Yes,
Uh,
but you can
to-
define just, with workstation classes, you
One
can
single
define
job
just
definition.
that just once.
Oh,
So-
okay. And then you just assign it to,
In the workstation class, you have the list of all the workstations. You have a job stream on that workstation class with that job inside, and it will be, when planned, it will be cloned 100 times.
Okay.
And if you have a new workstation, you don't have to create all the definition, just add the new workstation in the class.
okay, that's good. That's good.
Just to confirm that, you can actually send M4 files to multiple domains, to multiple servers. So
With the same job?
to FTA, can you do FTA to, DA to DA? Can you go DA to 5 DAs? So you're sending the files 5 times to 5 different servers from one?
Not with a single
source.
job.
You need more
You
different
need
job
5
definitions.
jobs?
Yes.
Okay.
And would this work from D to Z? And Z to D?
Not from different masters. It works only on distributed machines. It can work both under a distributed master or a IZWS controller with Z-centric agents. But these kind of jobs, both the source and targets, are a Z-centric agent or a dynamic agent under the same master.
What would happen if you had a firewall between the targets? Because traditionally, if we do have things about firewalls, so we'd say we want to open it for the netmap or whatever.
No, you just need to have both agents able to talk with the file proxy that on distributed is on the master, and you install on
So
different
the
machines.
same port as the other communications then?
It's the HTTPS, yes, it's the 31116 by default. For the
Can you
master,
install the-
not sure for the file proxy.
It's 4444.
Can you install the decentric agent on the OS to manage files from Z?
Where? On the DCX, but I'm not sure how much visibility of the USS file system do you have from there. I'm not played with DCX enough to know that these mounts.
We would need to test more on.
Yes, on DCX to see how you can mount USS files or stuff like that. But you can still use the standard file
FTP.
transfer with FTP. That's probably the best option also because it provides all the options also to allocate the data sets with the right format.
Is there any limitation with the file transfer using the pool name rather than the agent name, or does it have to be the agent name?
No,
It will still allocate the correct
Yes.
workstation.
it works in both cases. Also in this demo, he's using one of the two workstations is the pool.
Yep, it's a dynamic one here.
Of course, in most cases, you will need a shared file system to make sense with that. So, or using Affinity.
Okay, I will save this definition. Okay, because I'll try to run it, so let's cross the fingers. Okay, it has been submitted, so we can actually monitor the status of this job. Okay, and it is running, of course, because we are transferring 4 or 5 files that are of 1 GB size. So here the network will not help us. So maybe we will not have a good speed of transferring. But as you can see here from, maybe I missed to say that. From the Workload Designer here, where you can monitor the status of your jobs for file transfer, and even for a bunch of other plugins, you will find this option enabled, which is the workflow details. So actually, if you click here, you can see much more information about the execution of your job. In this case, for file transfer, you will see this, in which you have the list of all the files that you are currently transferring from one workstation to another one. That's the same even for the other protocols, of course. And you can here to have more information about the status. For example, here we can see that the transferring of those files is going good. This one that is quite more bigger, it's proceeding much more slowly. We can stop, for example, the execution of one of those transferring, just because we are mean. So let's see what happened.
And Franco, are you able to see the chat? There's a couple of questions in the chat you might want to answer as the.
Okay, sure.
So the transferring of all the files has completed. We only have this file here that is failed since we have stopped it. And we can select the file stock that just failed and click here for failure reason, just to understand why the transferring of this file has been has failed.
When you can pause, we can see the questions in the chat.
Okay.
Let me know when you can pause.
Okay, I will just restart this transferring and then we can go. So here we have the failure reason that is saying that you have stopped the transferring of that file. And another thing that you can do here is to restart the transferring of the selected file or maybe resume that one, so it will start from the latest part that you have been transferred.
To restart, we restart from the beginning. Resume, we start from the point where it stopped.
Exactly. Or you can even decide to restart all the job, so all the transferring of all the files. So let's resume this one. And okay, as you can see, it is now in progress, starting from 37%, which is the point in which we failed because we stopped it before. So I think that we can go with the questions.
So first question from Sarah was that we selected the pool if it was going to distribute the file to all the members of the pools or not. No, it will go just to one of the members of the pools. So that's why I was saying it was better in those scenarios if you have a shared file system. So if the pool members are actually the same target, logically the same target. If you want to clone it, you have to look at workstation classes to have the job cloned multiple times. That's the best way to have a single definition that will run multiple times. About the ports, it's using the HTTPS port, so it's using the 3.1.1.6. If the file proxy is on the master, it's just a component, an additional component inside Liberty. If it's installed outside, it's the 4.4.4 by default.
But you can even change it if you want.
Or install it as 3.1.6 if it's not on the same machine where the master is running.
Yep.
Are there any limits on the size of the file you can transfer, and what is the performance hit if you start using this quite a lot?
I think the performance are mostly impacted by the network. I see some overload on the file proxy. Yeah. That could be the bottleneck eventually if you have a lot of file transfers at the same time. But it can be easily scaled up because you can just provision additional file proxies on additional machines, and so you can scale that horizontally. So you just need to install it, register that, and all the next file transfer automatically will pick one of them.
Yeah, or even
we actually will have a small enhancement in Fixpack 1 to make a better load balancing there.
Yeah, you can select, for example, divide your agents in batches and say, okay, all those agents will be served by this file proxy. So you can, from all the agents, define which is the file proxy that should manage all the transferring for that particular agent. So we are introducing a lot of things even here.
Another question was if the file already existed destination, what's the behavior? We have an option on how to handle that. You can stop that or rename it, I think.
Yeah, there are a bunch of options. You can replace, rename it, you can append, or you can skip it. So the file, if the file is it will not transfer, or you can append. So there are a lot of options that actually are already present with the previous version of file transfer, but even with the new protocol can be used.
So it applies not only to agent, but also to the standard protocols.
All the standard protocols.
What about the host types? Is there a limitation there? So if it's a Linux host or if it's a network device, would it work the same?
No, they should be the same. So because it's actually the target agent that is pulling the file, so it's able to handle that. We don't use.
You've got the agent on both ends.
Yes.
What's the final disposition of the job that's currently, because you've got one failed transfer? Is that now an appended job, or is that you've got 3 successfuls and 1 failed? So is that now an append job, or is that a
If you have one
successful job?
If you have a failure, it's an event, even if single one.
You mean in general, or if you?
No, just obviously you've got 4 transfers there, yeah, 3 successful ones.
Yeah, I think that it's
so
for the space.
Final disposition would be.
If it fails, then we have a let's see.
Can you adjust that so only send an event after several?
Because that's failed, but it's saying it's exec, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe it's it will goes in. Maybe I have.
Well, I would say that should be paused, shouldn't it? 'Cause you
Yeah.
paused it.
It should fail once you got a failure in the transfer.
Yes.
I think that here we have a problem in terms of space on VMs. So maybe once we got a timeout, we will got a failure
No, I'm
for
not
the
sure,
jobs.
but looks like a defect. So.
But it never happens.
It's supposed to abandon.
So, yeah, it will abandon.
So if you had that failure and you sent an event, would you get a subsequent event if that does transfer correctly? So would you have notification that the problem cleared?
If you are creating alerts with on the job status, yes. If you recover from here, for example, restarting, the jobs will go in success. So if you are watching both status changes, you will get 2 events.
And if you're managing, if you're doing what you've just done and you manually intervened and you've paused one of the transfers, I'm assuming that the workload dashboard will show it as a stuck job, something like that, waiting on that to be resumed. What would the operators see? Because obviously there could be 3 or 4 people, and we're all now geographically distributed.
No, sure.
So you haven't got that immediate communication. So if someone pauses a job because they're talking to a support agent over here, what would the other engineers see in the workload? Would they see it as stuck, or would we get a?
In case of stop, in case
Yeah,
of
so
someone stops the
transfer.
transfer, I'm not sure how it's reflected. The stopped one also reflected on the final job status.
Wait, thank you.
If I stop it,
If it's an abandon, it's
it
success.
should fail.
It should be an abandon.
So it should be, if it fails,
When
it
all
should be
the
an
other
event.
transfer is completed, it should go in
If
abandon.
someone intervenes and pauses it, it should still append as well, or should it start? I don't understand what the difference would be from an operation.
Should be stuck, shouldn't it?
Should be stuck. That would be my expectation. anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, or it can be an abandon. The stack is just on the job stream.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you have a job in abandon, it will be the job stream will be in stack.
Yeah.
No. So the point is if it's an exec or an abandon. That's I think, from a job perspective, I think that should be the case. But yeah, this one makes no sense. So okay.
No,
We have to-
it never happened.
But
It's
it
just
happened. It happened, so we have to investigate that.
Just the demo effort.
Something came out of it.
Okay, well, do we want to move to?
Yeah, let's move to the last part. So observability, we already talked about this. Oh, that was
Okay.
So I said before with Marco, we divided observability in 3 different chapters. One is metrics. Metrics are basically values that are always changing. So a value that you always have with the different values over time. So it can be how much memory is allocated on Liberty, or how big is each MSG file, this kind of stuff. So it's a value that anytime has a different value. And so with open metrics, we address that. We choose an open metrics that is standard. It's actually the Prometheus protocol, but all the observability tools are compatible with with open metrics, so it's easy to use whatever tool you want. For Prometheus, Grafana, we deploy automatically the integration in Kubernetes deployments. We have the Grafana dashboard public for everyone, but it's very easy to integrate that with all the other products. So you just specify the endpoint of our master DWC, and it will start collecting the metrics. It includes our middleware, so Liberty, the JDBC connections, so how many connections you have to the database, MSG files, but we also added some metrics about the overall workload. So how many jobs overall by each states are running in the environment, so you can monitor how the workload is evolving, and also by workstations and by folder, so you can monitor this evolution on according to your needs. The second chapter is events alerts. So there are other stuff that you want to monitor, like job events. We cannot have a metric for that because it's not something that using a metrics to monitor a job status will mean that for each job we need the different metrics that is pulled every few seconds to check if all the jobs that you have in plan, if they're in abandoned success. So it won't scale. So we use a different approach, and for this all this information, we decided to adopt Json Logs. Dynatrace, Splunk, many other observability tools have an out-of-the-box integration with that. So you just point to the right file, and it recognizes that it's a JSON log and pass that. Also on Kubernetes, there is Fluentd to work with them.
So the metrics part of it, yeah, when it starts looking at the data, the information, is that a turn on, turn off process within Logman, or is that when you can you stop doing the metrics? Does it slow it down? Because we have an awful lot of data that you could look at. Is it, I presume it's on the mainframe, it's on the master domain manager where it's running. So can you not feed it? I think I've had this question before, like, you're still learning from day one. Can we not give it 30 days worth of information to learn the metrics offload it, and then so when it comes online, it's got 30 days of metrics information. You understand? Instead of just learning it and turning it on, we've got lots of standard lists, we've got lots of job outputs that it could go through. We could feed into it from day one.
No, I'm not got it. No,
Okay,
sure.
so I just looking at all the metrics, all the data. A job on a Monday takes 2 minutes. On Tuesday it takes 2 minutes. On Wednesday it takes 2 minutes. On Thursday it's taking 20 minutes. So that will be an outlier. So that's therefore it will probably see that there's some information that's different. Why is that? Instead of learning it on the Thursday or the Friday, that might be normal if we give it a month's worth of information. So it's got 4 Thursdays before it actually intervenes.
Yeah, this is not about performance on individual jobs, as said. So that's why I won't work with metrics. In our case, you can use the history for that. We will see how to use AIDA for that later. But anyway, the metrics are automatically collected in background and exposed on the server, and all the observability tools just pull the information every few seconds. And usually the observability tools are used to create an history of these values. So Prometheus usually keeps that in its database, and so you can go back at any time. You can use any machine learning AI tools. Some platforms already have that integrated to understand if that value is normal or not, and so having some smart thresholds instead of just a threshold, a static threshold, to generate alerts based on the metrics. So, but that's more on the capabilities of the observability tool. So alerts will be the right interface. It's basically, in the end, it's an evolution of the VM events. So it's based on the same configuration files. We just added a new format. You specify that you want the JSON log and which events you want inside. We also added now in Feedback 1, we're adding also the events for critical job risk level changes. So if you have a critical jobs, when the risk level changes, you have an event in the same JSON log. We have another JSON logs also for auditing. So in addition to it's basically replacing the old files. the old auditing files, you can keep the audits in the database, but also in JSON logs. And so with the JSON logs, you can extract them, send it to a QRadar, any security tool, so that can understand if those changes are normal or not. And so, or you can just keep them for archiving and having archived every change in the products for regulation compliance. And the third chapter that we will start probably in Fixpack 2 is APM. And we'll use so distributed tracing. That means that for every transaction that you make, for example, from DWC, you have a trace that starts on the load balancer, on the DWC server, on the engine server, on the database, and you see how much time is spent on each layer. And they can be collected, you can run statistics there and understand where we have performance problems. We are waiting Fixpack 2 because we rely on open telemetry for that. That is a new open standard that there was open tracing in the past, but is going to be replaced by open telemetry. So we're waiting for open telemetry that is already, for example, available in Instana, and many other tools are using that as well. With Instana, we already have some performance metrics can be already captured because it's integrated with the Java framework, so we will see something there. But the full compatibility will come with the OpenTelemetry that I said. I was saying running on Liberty, we are waiting for Liberty to support OpenTelemetry, and that should come around when we will ship Fixpack 2. So. And here, basically, the same information more in details. So you have them in the presentation and all the tools that supports open metrics, open JSON logs, and open telemetry. Okay, we skip this one.
Okay. So for this demo, we will see 3 different tools, just to basically understand what we can do with the metrics and with the logs that comes from workload automation. We will see something in Instana.
The presentation.
So we will see how to use Instana for performing infrastructure monitoring and monitoring our metrics. We will see something with Splunk to do the monitoring of all the JSON format logs that we actually provide, so for audit and events. And then we will see Grafana that can be used for both, so for monitoring the metrics and the audit and the events. So let's see what we can do with Instana. We can use it for example, doing monitor of the web application. So since we are on a workload automation environment, our favorite web application is of course the dynamic worker console. So we can decide to monitor it if we want with a simple Instana configuration. This will not give us a lot of information, but it can be useful, for example, to understand how many accesses have been done to our console and even from where. So we can use this for performing a sort of auditing on the accesses of our console. So if, for example, if we are a US company and we see that someone is logging from Pakistan, we can see that something is not going.
Much more useful for public websites than
for
us, but
yeah, that is good. But we have a lot of web applications, so if we are using some observability tools, or we are already using one of those observability tools, then we can see that we can even add this opportunity with the dynamic workload console. Then we can use it for monitoring distributed and complex topologies. So imagine that we have a large data center, or we have different machines that can be VMs, Kubernetes clusters, that they can be containers. Well, with this kind of tools, we can actually have the control on all the machines that we have that build up our environment, and understand maybe if they are up and running, if there is some problem with that. We can monitor them in terms of resource usage. For example, understand if all the volumes, if there is enough space on our volumes, if we have problems with the CPU or memory usage, and so on. So all those options come out of the box with Instana, and with any other tools that it's like similar to Instana. For example, maybe Dynatrace, it's quite simple. It can offer you the same more or less characteristics.
So is that historical or is that real time or near real time?
It's real time,
real
but
time.
all the tools usually also keeps the history.
Yeah, you can select your time window.
It depends on how you configure them, how
So
much
can
storage
do
you
a
have.
year, you can do a year if you want.
And depending on the complexity of the tools, they also sometimes, I'm not sure about Instana specifically, but some of the tools also can recognize some periodic patterns, and so having some dynamic thresholds based on previous usage.
And what about the scale of the information? So is it the device, is it the network, is it the interface? What scale are we talking about? Is it the host?
And you're asking about the other management platform, not the workload management.
Usually the point is, and where I tend to suggest is to use the same tool for everything. So usually enterprise tends to have the same tool monitoring all the environments.
Right.
And so that can scale a lot usually to cover multiple machines, multiple application stacks. And so it's just an additional tool that you're adding there.
All right.
So for example, also in Kubernetes, usually often you have Prometheus Grafana for the whole cluster.
Yeah.
And or you use external tools, so you have any agents inside that push the information on the cloud over there. Most of these products, including Stan, are cloud products, so you just have a local agents that is pulling the information and pushing that on the clouds.
It has to be an agent, does it? Could it be an API?
From our side, it's an API, but the more you do, less to call that one. So, especially for cloud products, you don't want the cloud to call your on-premise installations.
Okay, so among the other things, Instana is able to manipulate the open metrics. So since we have offered this opportunity, so all the metrics that we are actually exposing are following this open metrics standard. That means that all the tools that support this kind of standard can be useful for monitoring our metrics. All the metrics that we expose can be viewed under those two endpoints. So we have one for the server and one for the console. On the server for distributed environment, we will see much more information. So not only the liberty information, but all, for example, the status of our jobs. So all the things that are related even to our job submissions, job status, our environment information. Instead, for the Z environments, we will find those information on the endpoint of the console, because of course we have
the connector is running
connector
on the
is
console, so the Z connector will expose metrics for the ZOS workload mainly on the console endpoint.
And you can even decide which user can have access to those metrics. So you can define who inside your organization should have the access to be able to see those metrics. Of course, once you have collected and see all the metrics that we exposed, you can, in order to monitor your environment, maybe the best thing that you can do is to build up a dashboard. So you can bring up the query, the metric that may need useful for you to be monitored, and build up your dashboard. This is an example I will show it to you later in live, we can say. So let's just move on, and let's move to the Json Logs. So what we can do with Json Logs. So actually we are giving the chance to generate the database and plan audit files even in the JSON format. That means that wherever is the tool that you are currently using for performing observability in your organization, if it is able to parse a JSON file, then you can use it even for monitor workload automation audit files. Let's see with Splunk, for example, what I mean with parsing the JSON. So here are the information that workload automation provides on those files. If your tool is able to divide them, to parse them, you can see that, for example, we have performed on our database an action which is add. So we have added an object on our database. The object has this name. We have added it in this time frame, this timestamp on this workstation, and the user that have performed this operation is this one. So with those tools that are able to divide all those information, you can build up your searching, your query, and with this query, create your own dashboard. So this is the example with Splunk. So I have built up my query that actually will filter, for example, all the action on database and plan divided by action type. So I can see here that my team has performed a lot of get operations. So they retrieved a lot of objects from our database. They have added new objects. They have modified a bunch of objects. They have even deleted something from the database. The same thing can be done for the plan. And you can use those information to actually perform auditing on your plan and database. For example, here you can see in this particular query that I have built, that I have made, the amount of action performed by each user. So if I see here that someone that is not supposed to perform any action of my database is actually doing something, then I'm sure that we have maybe our database that has been compromised. The same for the plan. Even the events can be now generated in JSON formats. So the same rules that are for the audit log can be applied even for the events. That means that you can build up your own dashboard, monitoring the events that are important for you. For example, I want to monitor all the abandoned jobs that I have on plan. So that means that I can run my workload again, and if this number goes up, for example, because we have other jobs that goes in a band, we can define an alert and be notified every time, for example, this value grows. So every time we have a job that goes in a band, with all those tools that, among the other things that offer you the option to set and define notification and alert, we can be notified if something is not going good.
Is that available for Z as well?
If it's available for Z,
What, for like database updates?
We have
go ahead.
we have a feature to create an event log on USS for Z, but right now it's not yet in JSON log. So there is a different format, but you can parse that log as well.
I know we do record a lot of audit data on Z, but it would be quite handy to have it in one place like that.
But the matrix part that is available for DA that
The matrix, yes,
available.
Yeah, that's available also for this.
Yeah, but if you're talking about the events for jobs that's currently justified on USS, you have to parse them or use the other products.
The IBM Common Data Provider.
Yes, the IBM Common Data Provider that can already is integrated with that, can parse them and send them to Splunk or whatever.
Okay, and another tool that can be useful for monitoring metrics is, of course, Grafana, maybe one of the most famous one. So it lets you to monitor your workload automation in terms of job status, critical job risk, workstation, and database status. We will see even later live demo on that. And you can even decide to filter by workstation, folder, critical job name on the Grafana dashboard that we actually have already provided with the 9.5 Xpack 4. So you can find this dashboard from Grafana Lab, download it and import inside your environment. And this dashboard will come up with a bunch of predefined widgets in which you can monitor your environment in those terms, so workstation, critical jobs, and so on. If you are on a Kubernetes environment, you can even monitor your pods, your persistent volumes, and so on. And with Grafana, you can even perform the JSON parsing using maybe Loki, which is actually a data source that you can add to your Grafana environment, and it is able to parse all the JSON files just like we have seen with Splunk. So we can just create our query, and use that for create a custom dashboard that may be useful for us to monitor all the information that we need. The last thing that I want to say is that all those monitoring for audit and events becomes much more easier to do in all Kubernetes environments, because we have added now few sidecar containers that will run together with Workload Automation Server that actually will tail all those information. So basically that means that you can have those sidecar containers that will monitor constantly the data for database plan auditing, for the events, and even for the Liberty message.logs. And this is kind of useful, for example, if you are using one of those tools or among many others that will actually automatically detects all those sidecar containers, and then will let you be able to manipulate the content of all those files, so all the information that comes from those files.
FluentD is a powerful tool because it can parse multiple, all the containers outputs, convert them in events, and based on filters, you can decide based on the type of event how to route that to different applications. So that can be an easy way to integrate with a lot of different environments. For example, also you can get an event from our Json Logs, put that on Kafka, and from there Netcool can grab the events, for example. That can be a way.
Okay, that's the presentation. Let's see if we want to. Okay.
Already we should have lunch now, so I don't know if we want to stop.
Yes, let's
We do this
And
do the demo after.
Do the
Yes.
demo, yeah.
okay, you can do them.
So we are running slightly behind at the moment, so should we take 45 minutes for lunch?
It's composed by a bunch of things. I have 3 VMs, Linux VMs here. I have 2 Kubernetes clusters in which I can see all the containers, all the application stack. So everything that is actually deployed under this machine. Each of these layers corresponds to an application that I have on my machine. So, as I said, this can be used wherever the kind of machine that you are using. So, no matter if it is a VM, a container, a Kubernetes cluster, or a bare metal, you can actually monitor everything from here in terms of, for example, resources and status of your infrastructure. Do you remember when I performed the file transfer, moving files from a destination to another one? Well, I said that those files were actually huge. We talked about gigabytes of size. Well, as you can see now, I have here this red fridge, which is actually the VM in which I have performed the transfer, that it's now red. I'm sure that he will say that I do not have enough space, or the machine is now full, but actually I have division cut, so I don't see anything. Okay. So, okay, as you can see, I have here the overview of the entire machine. So I can see the OS of the VM, how many CPUs it has, the memory, the host name of the VM, and I have here one issue. So I can see that my partition is now full. That's because I have performed the transfer before. You can use all this information to perform the infrastructure monitoring. So everything that we are seeing here comes directly from Instana. So you can monitor your entire workstation, your entire infrastructure, no matter if you have all VMs or if you have hybrid systems or with different kind of machines. What we actually need to do to have everything to be detected by Instana is to install an Instana agent on a host machine. Once you have done that, the Instana agent will be automatically able to detect all the application stack on your VM, starting from the machine itself, so understanding who is that machine, which is this host name, the characteristics, the resources, everything, plus all the applications that are running on that. Of course, on this one, I have a bunch of Docker containers that are related to my workload automation environment, and I have also here Prometheus. Well, actually, for Instana, you don't need to install a different integration for Prometheus. It comes up out of the box. You just need to modify a configuration file and add the IP, the endpoint of your workload automation server, for example, if you want to monitor that. And then from there, you can actually have access to all the metrics directly from Instana. So here we have all those metrics that are basically gives us information about workload automation critical jobs. So what we can do here, we can pick up the metrics that we think are most useful for us to be monitored, okay, and create a dashboard. So here, for example, I have used few metrics that I think that are useful for me to be monitored, and I can see here an overview of my entire environment, of all my workload automation environment. I can see here from this metric an overview trend, an overtime trend of the database connection. So I can see if in any time I have a drop of this value to 0, and then understand that my server is no longer connected to the database. So I have problem, and I can see it from here without having access to the console, to the server, without understanding which is the status of my environment from the inside. I can wait from here, from the outside, from this dashboard, I can understand if my server is connected or not to the database. The same thing can be done with the workstations. So I can understand if they are linked or if they are, for example, not running. In this example here, I have an overtime thread of the status of all my workstation, of all the workstations that I think are critical for me. For example, here I use that for submitting SAP jobs. This is used for submitting MFT jobs and so on. And I can use those information in different ways. So over time or with this single value, because I want to highlight few workstations that for me are critical. Here I can see that my broken workstation is not running. Or here I can see that I have those workstations that are linked. So I will expect that something will not going correctly since I have one workstation down. And the same more or less information that we have for the workstation, we can find them even for the jobs. For example, we are exposing metrics that are currently giving us information about the status of all our jobs on the plan. So again, without accessing to the dynamic workload console, with those metrics, I can build up my dashboard and understand the status of all the jobs over time with any kind of time windows or even live, like here. So right now, I'm just looking at a real value of right now, how many objects, how many jobs are in my plan and in which status. So I have 1,000 jobs that are successful and 300 and jobs that are in waiting. You can use again the same metric to build up your own widget. So in the view that you prefer, so over time or as aggregate value. So you have here the number of successful jobs and waiting jobs. So you can, without having access again to the dynamic workload console, you can say, oh, I have a lot of waiting jobs. Let's see if they are waiting for me to respond a prompt or if there are dependencies that are not resolved. So from here, you can decide then to perform any kind of recovery action. For example, if you have jobs in error, then you will see here a red part inside.
I say these metrics are more to understand if the overall workload is running correctly, not the specific jobs. So that's not replacing the operation view, it's more for administrators or operators managing the environments to see that the environment is behaving correctly. So if you realize that there are no running jobs, probably you have an issue somewhere, and so you have to figure out that.
Yeah, even if you have a feed inside someone inside your organization that does not or that should not have access to workload automation, it can monitor just this one and say, okay, we see something in error, and then connect to the operation to the operation team and say, okay, we have something that is failing, so please perform recovery action on that, so we can resubmit or change definition if because we have an error and so on. So from that's the power of the monitoring tools that we wanted to highlight. And another thing that we want to highlight is that all the things that you see here are coming up from a standard. So that means that you can do this with Instana, but you can do the same thing with any other things, any other tools that are supporting the open metrics. So if you are already using something on your organization, just check if that tool is able to manipulate open metrics. And then if yes, you can add also workload automation to the list of the monitored application with that tool. Okay, let's end with Grafana.
Great question.
Yeah.
If I had Dynatrace or Instana, what do I need to do to get those views? Do I configure it? Yes, I saw all the benefit. Do you have a plugin, or is that you have to do a?
The metrics are just exposed on an HTTP endpoints on our components, so my DWC or the master, and so you have to configure the observability tool to gather information from that endpoint. So you specify our URL in the tool, and it will start collecting all the information automatically.
So you get the URL, that gets you the data into Instana, and then the dashboarding and the layout, is that from the HTTP?
No, that's manual. You have to do that manually, and we are going with feedback1. We are going to publish basically this dashboard as a sample to start with, but it's just a starting point. So every organization will customize that as they want. But yeah,
this is something that I have put in place because I like this layout, but it can be done with any kind of all metrics that we expose. So these are the list of all the metrics that are actually exposed under the endpoints that I have mentioned before. So we have one, this is for the server, and another one will be for the console, but in distributed environment, you will show, of course, monitor this one. And so you can bring up the metric that you need, one, and create your own widget. So,
Thanks.
Okay.
Can you drill down into the job log? So can you say that I set this up for a developer and he's got 10 jobs out of 1,000 jobs of the plan. So you can see the 10 jobs using this method. Can he actually not just view if it's execute or successful, or can he actually go inside and interrogate the job log?
No, that's not intended for that. So I say this is not for individual jobs troubleshooting. That's for availability of the service. While if you're using Json Logs, you can get all the information about the job that abandoned, and so, for example, use that information to build a launching context URL to access DWC and get the job log.
Okay. So the last thing that I want you to see is Grafana.
And I think, Marco, that finally we have in roadmap to add the job log to the event management to the send email. We added that.
Not sure, but it should be.
Yeah, we discussed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is Grafana, and as I said before, this dashboard is already available on Grafana app, so you can download it and use it inside your Grafana environment.
Grafana and Prometheus. So the interface is Grafana and is gathering data from Prometheus. That is keeping the history of the metrics that collects the metrics from Workload Automation and keeps the history of them.
Yeah.
And the Grafana is just the dashboard.
It's the tool that lets you see all the data that coming from Prometheus. So you have to download, of course, both of them. What you can actually do with this kind of dashboard? Basically the same thing, because the data set is the same. So our workload automation metrics, open metrics, of course. So you can monitor the status of your jobs, filtered by job status, or you can monitor the jobs status filtered by workstation, by folder, and so on. You can even here filter, select only the workstation that you want to see. So clicking one, you will see only the data that are related to that particular workstation. The same thing for the folders. So here, for example, I have selected that one. So I will see only data related to that particular workstation.
All these red lines are just artifacts of
Yes,
WebEx.
yes.
They're not coming from the screen.
Everything is quite more clear here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What about job type? Would you be able to get that stat?
No,
I mean, they're all
not
within
yet.
the-
But, so you mean the type of job, the plugins that you use?
Yeah.
That could be interesting. Yeah.
Because if you're having an issue and if you could sort it by job type and then you see, oh, there's a problem with that type, and then maybe that'll help you.
Could be interesting.
Can be interesting. Yeah.
We can add that metric, right? Somehow.
Yeah, we have to see. We have to check how it's. I do not remember how it's stored in the database. So if we can quickly make a query for that or not.
Should be in the database.
And I do not remember if it's on a specific column on the monitoring. Because we have to let the database works and makes the group.
I need to connect to mine again to have all the data. I lost the connection.
So, you can stop here.
But I have to reconnect again. I only want to let you see maybe something more that can be useful for you to understand. So don't mind now those widgets that now does not have any data. Let's focus on that one that is cached now. Important information that I wanted to highlight here, for example, is the estimated hand of your critical jobs. So a lot of information about critical jobs comes from our metrics, so you can monitor them by, for example, the potential risk, or you can say if one job is at high risk or not, and you can even monitor the number of incomplete predecessors that a job actually have. So the number of jobs that actually need to be run before that particular critical job will run. And this that it's really cool to see is an estimation graph of when your job, your critical job, will actually end. So here we have, as you can see, an estimation that says that that particular job will be scheduled in the, let's focus on one. So, no, I messed up. I don't have the connection, sorry. So that's what I wanted to highlight. And basically the same thing here. So for what we have seen before with Instana, you can monitor the status and the link status of your workstation. So in that particular example that I wanted to highlight before my connection just blew up, is that you can have an environment with all the workstation linked, but of course one can be down. So that means that I cannot schedule anything on that workstation. So from here, I can see, without performing any action from command line or performing any action from the dynamic workload console, I can see directly from here that something is not going properly on my environment. So that's basically what we wanted to highlight with our observability strategy, that you can use whatever the tools you want. At least it should support the JSON parsing and the open metrics, and then you can do anything from outside your environment.
And I think an important point of the observability tools using Metric is that the historical view. So it's not, you're not just focusing on the current value, but you can go back in the past. So if you have an issue during the night, you can go back and see how the system was behaving at the time of the issue, stuff like that. Or you can compare how